Now let's talk about something more fun. Dutch elections. We love some elections, don't we, folks? I've probably said that exact rhetorical question before, but I meant it then and I mean it now. We love our elections. All right. Now, I've got my items sorted for the moment. Elections time, the fun part. I have a Reuters link written down as well, but I think legitimately I just want to look at the Wikipedia article. Because I trust my own analysis over Reuters analysis. So, the 2025 Dutch general election. Early general elections were held in the Netherlands on the 29th of October 2025 to elect the members of the House of Representatives. The elections had been expected to be held in 2028, but a snap election was called after the Schoof cabinet collapsed due to the PVV withdrawing from the coalition. I actually talked about this as well when I might have even made a video on it, the latest far-right government collapse. True to form, if you look at the election results, projections have shown the Democrats 66, Order 66 moment, and the PVV as the largest parties, each winning 26 seats. If you look at this, it seems like the far right collapsed the government so hard, so many times that they have made people think, okay, maybe the far right is like not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't elect the people that just spend all their time screeching about immigrants because they can't run a government. They all hate each other and they never stop screeching about immigrants. You know, that's all well and good when you're trying to sell people on why you should be in government instead of the other guy. But if you just keep screeching about immigrants in government rather than being like, okay, now let's spend money on transportation here. Let's let us reinforce the rail infrastructure of this country. Let's make sure that hospitals are properly staffed. Let's make sure that everybody's getting an education. You know, if you're not doing any of that, then you're kind of on a clock there. So you can see here 26 and 26 in the House. You have D66, then PVV, VVD, GroenLinks, PVDA. Then CDA, and then JA21, FVD. So it looks like the top represented parties are dominated either by the far right, in the case of these down here and these here, or the like center left libs, or just the center libs, with, you know, D66, CDA, and JA21, with a couple exceptions being the SP, which again only 3 seats, and then GL PVDA, which has 20 seats. I could foresee a coalition potentially happening between the D66 and PVDA and like the CDA, you know, like the lib left's kind of liberal social democrat coalition. But it's safe to say that like people are kind of losing trust in the far right parties. The big thing I want to hammer on here is that it's still troubling. This doesn't necessarily alter the course of political development in the Netherlands from what I warned about last time. If you guys remember, in the video I did where Geert Wilders can't hold a fucking government together, I did make a video about this. Shout out to all the Dutch homies. The United States followed a certain path where the far right got elected, and then crisis ensued, government instability, etc. And people elected Joe Biden and centrist liberals. And then when the centrist liberals predictably did nothing, they went right back to the populist right, but the populist right was actually more frothing at the mouth and had a plan of action to destroy the country, which surprisingly people actually kind of went for, just because it was a narrative, any narrative at all, right? basically the moral of that story is political success in the modern age with a political and economic system that people are overwhelmingly losing trust in. The road to success is populism. The road to success is paved with populism. So much so that you could have the best platform in the world, but if you're not populist, you will lose. You could have the best political program in the world, but if you are not populist, if you can't sell people, or if you're unwilling to commit to giving people a narrative where there are extraordinarily and inherently flawed elements of the system, there are bad actors in the system who are bad actors by virtue of, I don't know, their class or some other association. If you don't have a narrative like that, you will lose. And if you do have a narrative like that, no matter how harebrained it is, you will win if the opposition doesn't have one. You know? And that's what we're witnessing right now. The far right, most harebrained political platform and governing ability known to man, they suck. But they have a narrative, and they know how to sell people a narrative. They can say, like, yeah, obviously people have lost trust in the system. Life is getting worse. Cost of living, blah, blah, blah. And it's because of those damn immigrants and Jews. I don't know the degree to which the far right party in the Netherlands says Jews. In the United States, the far right is very fond of blaming Muslims and immigrants. In other countries, it's Muslims and immigrants as well. In some countries, it's Jews and immigrants, etc., right? The minorities change depending on the country. But the reason that the liberals haven't been effective, and why I think these liberals will not be particularly effective in challenging the far right, even when they control the government, is that they don't have any sort of narrative to go on. Because D66 are center-left liberals, they might, I don't know, they might shore up some funding in some places, I guess, I don't know, but they're not going to do anything that sort of fundamentally changes for the better social relationships in society, right? Like a lot of the social rot, socioeconomic rot that's associated with like data centers, people becoming more lonely, corporations consolidating more and more economic power. That's going to continue happening under the liberals, just a little bit more slowly and more institutionally. They're just going to more competently administer the decline that births the far right to begin with, right? So that's a bit of a problem, right? This is a break for a little while, but it's kind of like a calm before the storm almost, I want to say. Seriously, if the Socialist Party down here, or if the GLPVDA doesn't start incorporating more and more young political demographics into their parties, into their coalitions, and if they don't start giving some kind of popular and populist narrative for people to go off of, then they are going to be stuck in a slow, brutal, painful decline, while the far right, try as they might, cannot lose. Basically, expect the far right to be, isn't this how Trump wins? Yes, that is how Trump won, because even out of power, he was super, super relevant, because the far right performs way better when they're out of power. That gives the populists ammunition to then go to, the government that says that is like not really doing anything, and say, look at the government. They're not fundamentally changing anything. You've been cheated, It's such an easy layup. And the liberals, by virtue of not wanting any fundamental change, liberals being, liberal politicians, liberal parties, by not wanting any change at a fundamental sort of level, to, change the social and economic character of a country away from capitalism and towards a more economically democratic system, they give the far right easy ammo to say, look, they're not doing anything to help you. And there's a version of that is very, very true and accurate. The lie by omission comes in the fact that the far right isn't going to do anything to help you. They're just going to blame everything on immigrants and accelerate the already deleterious trends that, liberal democracy is responsible for even harder. Expect the media to still be talking about the far right even when they're not in power. Liberals are just very bad at wielding power and wielding the bully pulpit, and the tools of statecraft and media. Because for the liberals, all of their major political aspirations have already been met. There is nothing that liberal parties actually want for the world. They want things to remain as they are, right? That's not an affirmative political aspiration. That's not a project to build towards. As horrendous as it is, mass deportation and detention camps is an affirmative political project to build towards, because that's something that you need to do that hasn't been done yet, right? In the minds of the far right. That is an objective that they have that has not yet been met. And they will go into fucking demon timing to get it. And on the other side, you have the socialists, who are similarly excluded from the halls of power by virtue of being both populist and inconvenient for the ruling classes. The political aspiration of socialists is to make society more democratic, to finally break through the class barrier that separates the owning class from the working class, that creates all of these toxic relationships where if you're a shareholder or an owner of a business, you have to make sure that the bottom line gets padded, and you keep having to, or just voluntarily because you don't really care, going to cut wages, lay people off, cut staff, cut wages, etc., etc. Meanwhile, spend more on, in the case of the United States, stock buybacks, or increase our own salaries, that sort of thing, buy properties, do deals with other companies to build these data centers, buy and sell people's data to make line go up, right? Their line continues to go up, and because that line continues to go up at such a pace, there's a widening gap between them and the rest of society, which makes the rest of society worse, because you can feel that distinct lack of wealth for the people that need to live day to day. Does that make sense? Basically, what I'm saying is, every country is going to experience a version, every developed country that is a liberal democracy is going to experience a version of neoliberals kind of coasting by on power, briefly losing to the far right, coming back, and then everything going to shit, right? Every country is going to experience some version of that, and the only way to resolve the issues that both arise from and cause that, the only way to fix the problems that would cause such a relationship between a do-nothing government and an insane government, or that would result from a do-nothing government and an insane government, is socialism, is to make society more economically democratic and beneficial for everybody, particularly people who are very economically vulnerable. And you can't do that within the framework, with the existing framework of capitalism. You actually do have to restructure the relationship that people have to production and economic exchange, and I know that a lot of that is waxing poetic. A lot of that is, me engaging in platitudes. So let me get concrete real quick. I know a lot of liberals fancy themselves policy nerds. Here is something that you could do, two, in fact, policy suggestions that would genuinely be major steps on the road to a socialist society where everybody lives a good life. Number one, ban the stock market. No more stock trading. Speculative value, no longer a thing. Stop it. Number two, all housing is now affordable housing, owned by the state, or rather, not owned by the federal state, owned by the municipal government. In the same way that we treat roads, paths, and rail lines if you're in Europe. That shit is public infrastructure. Housing is public infrastructure, and it should be treated as such. Two things. And if you're in America, then number 3 would be numbers 3 and 4 would be start phasing out cars in favor of trains, again, public infrastructure, and also Medicare for all or single payer health care system, nationalize the health sector. That's something that's applicable to every country. Legitimately, I don't think the market should be allowed to touch medicine, because it's the easiest example of in the world of an inelastic demand curve where there is no price that somebody could raise a life-saving medicine to that people wouldn't be willing to pay, because it's either you pay that much money or you die. You know? That's why medicine is so expensive in the United States. It's because the market fucking ruins everything. Yeah, I guess my appeal to the European liberal would be, first and foremost, think about the relationship between corporations and medicine in the United States. That is the relationship that we have to break, not just in medicine, but in everything, in transportation, in housing, in electricity and the internet, right? All that stuff needs to be, to some degree, nationalized. And when I say nationalized, I mean mostly taken over by like municipal governments, you know? Like we already do this with certain utilities. Water is a public utility. You know how cheap water is? It's like $30 a month for running water. That is not expensive, at least in the United States, it's not. If you sort of cost adjust for the cost of living in Europe, that's probably 15 euros per month. That's how much water costs to have running water in your home. And that's because it's public infrastructure. There's not like a million different layers of contracting or whatever, you know? And to relate it all back, those are just some policy examples of how you could wrest control of essential infrastructure and components of society in an economic sense from the private sector, from the market, and put it in the hands of democratically accountable bodies, into the hands of the people. You know, if you don't do that with water, with electricity, with the internet, with transit infrastructure, with housing, with medicine, with whatever else, none of this is going to get fixed. And we're going to be in a perpetual death spiral where it's the far right, then liberals, then the far right, then liberals, and nothing ever gets better. That's what we're watching play out right now. It's just the liberals' turn to administer the decline. You know? Also ban generative AI, thank you. That's another thing that I would do. So, you know, shocker, the guy who's a socialist says that the way you get out of this cycle of government going back and forth between do-nothings and insane people is to do socialism. Thank you. But, you know, I did my best to kind of explain what some of the things would be that would be like socialist in nature. You know, like taking the means of production, i.e. like certain sectors of the economy, and putting them in the hands of democratic control, you know, rather than having them in an unelected control by like a board of directors or shareholders or something like that, you know. That's probably the best I can visualize any of that. But I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about elections because it's fun. Look, you know, I get to go to a Wikipedia article. My autistic ass gets to look at the colors, and there's links, and there's all these funny letters that describe these parties, and there's the funny words that describe what the parties are, and there's funny numbers that describe how powerful the parties are. So I really do like these segments. Maybe I ought to do more election-related content. Cut the segment there, future me. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.